So it's like putting everything through a sieve and looking for what major themes begin to emerge and how consistent those voices are in the folks that you've interviewed, in the data that you've reviewed, and beginning to take a look at how consistent that was with what your expectations were of what you were going to find.
So I would agree with Marion. I think, first of all, it's a question of really looking out there and seeing where do we need to gather information from, whether that's trends that are provincial, local, regional, whether it's concerns that are based entirely on our own community, whether it's things that we already know, put them through the sieve and filter them down. And ideally, I think candidly, if you come away with, say, 3 or 4 key trends that you believe you should mirror and match and respond to, then that's probably a manageable number, and then you can build, and we'll talk about this, build your goals from there, build your action statements from there. I think a tremendous amount of data that's collected is already actually inherently known in the organization. And so that you should really begin with, the primary source, which is yourself. And again, not necessarily based on what you've got internally, not necessarily feel that you have to go and spend, days and weeks and months gathering materials that actually, your own people and your own skills, your own experience, you already know these things. You've already actually got them in-house.
The other risk I think that boards run into is that they do stop there without asking themselves the question, what have we been hearing over time that maybe we didn't like? Maybe it came from people who we identify as troublemakers, that we've been discounting. And if there's been enough of that, then I think that we need to become uncomfortable and begin to pay attention to that.
Where are we not doing well? Where are people disconnected? Where are stakeholder groups disenfranchised? I think it's important for us to be open and transparent about our failures as well as our successes. We tell a lot of success stories. We really should be telling some not so good success stories. We should be uncomfortable. I really like that theme. I actually asked the trustees before we even start the whole process to write headlines about what they'd like to see about the board written online or in print 3 to 5 years from now. And they write their headlines, you gather them up, you look at kind of similarities, you put them into groups, and right away you start to get a sense of direction of what the board is actually thinking is important. And that then helps you probably determine, well, if this is fair, then probably we should get data we should bring data in to try and help us determine how we flesh out those 3 or 4 or 5 things.
I would agree. And if in fact there are more than 3 to 5, usually they are identifying operational issues. Yeah. So, that's really where that pushback, that facilitation comes into play about questioning, the whys. That why would that be? Why? What's the response? Where's that going to lead us? What's the benefit to the stakeholders as a result of those? And making sure as soon as we begin to push it up to a higher level, we naturally start to decrease the number of priorities that we have in place. Questions are my big thing about boards. The number one skill that trustees need to develop is the ability to ask really good questions. And the challenge is that, just as a backdrop, I don't think that many know how to do that well. So, there's a whole series of questions like, what's my reaction? Why am I reacting that way? If I was standing on the other side, what would my viewpoint be to this? Why is that a trustee issue as opposed to being a staff issue? I just think that there are those really big questions, and we need to lay them out there and listen to what people say, and then build on those.
And even if you followed a very simple, like Six Sigma approach, the 6 whys, and you just train people in how to ask the 6 whys, I think trustees would uncover a tremendous amount of data and information that would then help to inform what they think their outcomes really ought to be, and therefore what their goals ought to be. It's a great question.
So my bias is I think that you do go back.
Right,
I think that you go back particularly to those stakeholders and those groups who've contributed to the process. Part of the reason is it's out of respect. There's a long-term investment we're making in the relationship with those people. And if we want them to support us in the future, we need to continue to engage them in the process. The other is I think it's a sanity check. Did we hear you properly?
Every public sector organization says we don't get enough community engagement. It's very tough to get people to come out. It's very tough to get people to participate. And really the major reason for that is because we're not actually reaching out right at the start of the process and say, well, thank you for the input. Now, here's what we think you said. Did you actually say that? And once you've got them buying into that process, then chances are pretty good they're going to stay with you through the rest of the process. I think this whole business of actions is a challenging area, because I think there's a great danger that in worrying too much about actions at the board level, you actually do start to teeter into operations, and you teeter into things like school improvement plans and board improvement plans.
And in the strategic planning process, there's a point at which the board steps back.
Right.
And staff steps in.
Right.
So certainly there is a stage at which, with whatever the board will call it, whether it's a board operation plan or a system operation plan or whatever, there are going to be specifics that are now put into place. And there's going to be short-term and mid-term outcomes, and there's going to be measurements, and that's going to filter down to the board improvement plan. It's going to go down to the school improvement plan, department plans. But that's staff's job.
It should be a living, breathing part of pretty much everything the board does on a regular basis going forward through the year.
But another piece to that is I think that we allow whatever it is that we put into place to be so vague. Nobody understands what it is anyway. And even the term, it drives me crazy when I see things like best in class or model behavior.
21st century learning.
Like, what does that mean? And the problem becomes that if, in fact, we can't define it to our stakeholders, we also can't define it to staff. We need to talk about it. I think that we need to talk about it in terms that aren't numbers. This is where storytelling comes into
Right.
play. That, I think that we need to tell the story about if, in fact, one of our strategic objectives is, relative to enhanced student learning, whatever that statement happens to be. I think that we need to bring faces to that. We need to tell stories about that. And the story needs to be part of the communication plan right up front. And the director and the chair of the board and the SOs need to know what that story is, and they need to go out and they need to talk about it. Or if this is what where do you see yourself? How do you contribute to that? How does what you do on the basketball court when you're coaching contribute to that? Is it consistent? Where might we be falling short on things like that?
Plans need to be written so that the youngest, most junior custodian in the newest school in the county or the region can read the plan and can say, I get that, and I get to a certain extent how I can contribute. And then exactly as Marion says, that conversation needs to be rolled out through the board to all the various different groups that say, does the plan make sense? And how do you see yourselves fitting in?
And the reason people step into leadership positions in a board, whether that leadership position is as a department head, whether it is as a principal, whether it is as an SO, whether it is as a director, is that leadership calls us to being able to tell that story and to motivate people and to be able to explain things in a way that people can become engaged in them.
You've actually got the courage to take all of this and to put it together in a format that people actually understand and say, wow, I can do that. I can get involved in that. One of the things that many of them do is they have almost like kind of an action committee or a strategic planning group that has the power to monitor and evaluate what's going on around the school system relative to is it in sync with the strategic plan, and has the power to make recommendations and suggestions, and as Marion said earlier, to come back to the board on a regular basis and say, you know what, we're really failing in, I'll use safe schools. We're really not creating the safe school environment that the plan had in mind, and here's why. And the committee has power to act. That's one way. I think the other way is just to make the plan a whole lot more visible everywhere.
I'm gonna build on that as well, and I'm gonna go back to the organization I was talking about, where the board deals with the priorities. If you walk around, this is a hospital, if you walk around the hospital wall or floors, every department has a board that has their goals based on what the organization's goals are. And it is public. So as you're a patient, as you are a person visiting a patient, you see what the target is, what the progress is, and staff meet every day to take a look at, here's what we're working toward, here's what we're doing. There's real-time data.
It's one of the key principles of persuasion, right? The principle of consensus. That in this office, right here in this office, the reception office, where there are 4 of us working, here are the goals that we've set relative to the strategic plan, and here's how we're doing. And because they're there and they're written down and they're out there, the consensus is that we're driving to try and achieve those. And by consensus, we are going to make it. There are so many things I think that we could do creatively, no cost, minimal cost, creatively, entrepreneurially, bravely, to make the plan.